This is the Mental Metal Podcast, and I am your host, Coach Matt Thomann. I'm a former athlete, teacher, coach, and athletic director that switched careers after surviving cancer and a stroke in the fall of 2020. But I'm also a dad of a son and a daughter that were successful high school athletes that went on to college. Now I use that experience along with my ICF coaching certification when helping teams, coaches, and athletes from all over the country. Each week, I will pose a specific question that will help coaches of all types better understand mental toughness. In the Mental Metal Podcast, coaches will learn to help their athletes overcome adversity without being the adversity they need to overcome. Welcome back, metalheads. It is the Mental Metal Podcast. I am your host, Coach Matt Thomann, once again. Thrilled to be here. Happy you're here. Happy you're joining me. So excited to do this show. Not just this week, but every week. But I am also really excited about this week. So the same thing. I'm going to keep pleading. Like, share, follow. Put this out there. I'm on every social media I can figure out. I have a Facebook page. Go on and like that. Follow. I'm on Instagram, dropping, with the cooler kids on there. I have a Twitter page I put stuff on, that's less anymore. The social media stuff's strange on the sort of different vibes you get from them. But I put it on everything, even that new one, Threads. I don't even know what that's supposed to be, but I go ahead and put stuff on there. But regardless, if you find me on there, Coach Thomann or Mental Metal Life Coaching, Mental Metal Coaching, get out there, give me a like, give me a share, give me a follow. I appreciate it. It's my goal in this business is to get out there and share this message as much as I can, and you can genuinely help me do that by sharing. So, we're getting into the thick of basketball season, getting going. Again, I've mentioned it before on this podcast. It's my favorite season of the year, getting into basketball. And I've had a couple of basketball coaches on lately, and I've got another basketball coach coming on today. His name is Dave Feeney, and you're going to hear Dave and I have known each other for a long time. We went to college together, played basketball together at Millikan University, and Dave and I were similar in at least in our abilities, in that we're good enough to get on Division III rosters, and I would say we're good basketball players, but not good enough to like scare anybody at the Division III level. Whenever we didn't necessarily get a lot of PT and didn't scare our opponents a whole lot. But hey, that's okay. Dave's a great guy, and he was still a good player, but he's even a better coach. You're going to hear on here, his decision to become a coach, and the people that prompted him to do that and led him down that path was just a great decision on his part. He was a coach there at his senior year. He started being a student assistant, and he has gone on then right out of college and picked up coaching girls basketball at the high school level, and then was an assistant at some Division III. And I'll go ahead and say it because I didn't even mention it. I don't make it a big deal in this podcast, but he's a really good coach for coming out of college and being able to pick up a program that was struggling, because that's the kind of gig you get coming right out of college. It's a struggling program, and to build it into something. And then, as you'll hear him mention, I think his team won 31 games last year, and the year before that 27, something like that. He puts out a really good product, and they're a really tough team anymore, but just his success for winning and losing, and his record is not the main reason I had him on here. I was able to go on and speak at his school after I got into this gig and doing the coaching and the speaking. Went in to speak at his. They have a varsity club type thing with their athletes, and such a great idea. And they bring speakers in, and they were early on in my speaking career after getting my coaching certification and all that. They invited me in, him and my good friend John Hughes, to speak with their athletes. And they were so gracious to have me come in and do that. And I could tell in what they were wanting me to do with their athletes and how receptive their athletes were when I was there, that I was not the first guy to talk to their athletes about mental health, mindset, and being prepared mentally for a game. It was obvious to me that I was not the first guy talking to them, and they were very receptive. It was great to talk to them. And then as I've stayed in touch with Feeney, Coach Feeney, over the years, we've had conversations about how to do this, and his use of his time in practice and some of the things he does that we're going to talk about, focusing on mindfulness and gratitude and just the mental side of things, along with being successful. Right? My point is, it's not an accident. His success in wins and his success in how his players feel about him and his success in players that go on, it's not an accident. I do believe that it's highly connected to how he runs his practice, how he treats players, how he helps them focus on their mental health and things like that. It's connected. And I think at the end of this episode, I'm going to do a little breakdown, and just be prepared. I'm starting to get much more convicted in what I think is best for athletes and coaches and programs, and just maybe a little bit more of a there will be a little bit more of a call to action this week. Some of the things I was validated in talking to Coach Feeney on some of the things am starting to see is what's important, seeing that he's already putting these into practice and being very successful with them. And so I'm validated, pumped, and it's going to be a little bit of a call to action on how you should be able to do some of these mindfulness activities with your athletes. So stick around, enjoy the conversation with Coach Dave Feeney. Confidence is knowing what you can do and then going out and doing it. But confidence is also knowing what you can't do. Well, I am confident that I can help your athlete if they're struggling with some mental aspects of their game. However, I'm also confident that I can't help them if you never schedule the first session. That's pretty simple. And I get it. You're busy. Your kid's hesitant. You aren't sure how coaching works. Well, let me fix some of that. If you click on the link provided, you'll be able to schedule a free 30-minute session with me. Your athlete will experience mental performance coaching, and you as the parent will get to ask some questions. There's no cost. There's no obligation. It's just an opportunity for you and your athlete to better understand the transformative power of mental performance coaching. I've helped dozens of athletes conquer anxiety, reach goals, and get over confidence issues. And I use proven methods and techniques. If your athlete has a goal, I'm confident I can help them get there. However, I can't schedule that first session for you. So click on the link to schedule that session. At Mental Metal Coaching, booking the first session is up to you, but the transformation is up to us. Hey, welcome back to the Mental Metal Podcast. I am here with my guest today, longtime friend and former teammate. I hope you noticed, Coach. I put my shirt on today.
I love it.
Yeah, we were teammates back more years ago than I would like to admit. It's been several, right?
Yeah.
We were teammates at Millikan University. many moons ago, and we've kept in touch just because we ended up living in Central Illinois quite a bit and seeing, I know he coached, and we had kids, and maybe not in the same exact circles, but close enough. So, so Coach Dave Feeney, now you are if I get this right, you are the head girls coach for Normal Community
That's right.
Normal, Illinois. Yeah. But
absolutely.
Talk to me a little bit about your background in basketball and coaching, because I know that's not the only thing you've done.
Right. So right out of Milliken, actually, I still remember in the spring of my senior year talking to Coach Littrell about whether I was offered a girls varsity head coaching job at Normal Community, and then I was also offered a junior high boys job. And I remember going into Coach Littrell and saying, like, hey, what do you think? And what would your advice be here? And I took the girls' job, a lot of Coach Litt's advice. And I did that for 8 years and loved it. Really had a great experience. And then my wife and I had our second child, and I was kind of thinking, okay, maybe I'll get my master's degree and try to make a little bit more money in this teaching deal. And so I took a year off from coaching, and then Ron Rose at Illinois Wesleyan was gracious enough to reach out and ask if I would be interested at all in volunteering. So I volunteered with Illinois Wesleyan for a year, and then he brought me on staff. I was able to still teach at Normal Community, but to be on staff at Illinois Wesleyan, I did that for 8 years. And then my kids got older, and I started kind of helping out with them again. I was an assistant with Normal Community Girls for 2 years, and then I've been back at the helm. Now I just finished my third year kind of back as the head coach of Normal Community Girls Basketball. So it's been kind of a circular journey, but one I've really enjoyed.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but did you do some like student coaching at Milliken while you were there?
I did. So, okay. I always tell people I was just good enough as a basketball recruit, Matt, and you remember this, to help get Coach Ramsey let go. So I was
apparently we were there together,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. So then when Coach Littrell became the coach, and that first year he didn't really get to recruit, and so he was kind of stuck with guys like me. And then after that year, he brought in some of his own guys, and Coach Litt was great to me. I mean, he was very honest and just said, hey, it's going to be really tough for you to probably have a chance to get on the floor very much. I'm going to go with the youth movement of the guys that I recruited. But what would you think if I know you're interested in coaching? What would you think of doing this? And so, yeah, my junior and senior year, and he gave me the keys to a lot of stuff. I got to run some stations. I got to be the head coach of our JV team against junior colleges a couple times. He sent me out recruiting. And so it was great experience that as a 21, 22-year-old, learning kind of on the fly. And he taught me a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we could go down a whole long story on that about how I'm sure at some point it was like, I'd really rather be playing. But or maybe you didn't. Maybe you're like, I don't know, this is probably better anyway. I don't know. Like, but you're a kid.
It was a weird thing. I didn't love to hear it. I admired the fact that he was being straightforward. And that's something I've tried to do with our players is just, be honest. And Coach Littrell did a great thing for me in kind of helping me come to that decision. And he basically said, he's like, hey, there's a spot for you on our team. I'm just not sure you're going to love, your role on the team. And it took a lot of thought from me to kind of come to that decision, but I went back in and just kind of said, hey, I don't think I'm going to play. I think I'm going to help you in this way. And then he could have hid his excitement at that choice. I think when I said I was going to move from playing to helping him out, he seemed all too happy. But it was
well, okay, but that could have been one of two things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, yeah. So because I think that's I can remember. I mean, I can remember you doing that. I think I had gone by the time that happened. I was gone because that was your senior year. But I can remember before that. I don't know. It's just something about you that everybody was like, oh, I think he's going to make a good coach someday. Going to be a good coach someday. And I don't know what that was supposed to mean at the time, but I don't know. You clearly, I don't know. That was clearly your destiny. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, I will say this. I always had a good understanding, I feel like, of what I was supposed to be doing. Physically, I don't know that I always was able to do those things at that level. But again, I just can't say enough about the guidance that Coach Litt and his assistants, Chad Bolser, Mark Smith,
Mm-hmm.
kind of they saw that same thing in me and really kind of fanned that flame, so to speak, to say that that was something I should be excited about. And then to allow a student, because I was really concerned, okay, what's this role going to look like? And then when they just basically, like I said, kind of gave me the keys and said, hey, what do you want to do? And this is what we're going to ask you to do. And one of the best compliments I have about that is when I was a senior, there was a freshman that came to me one day at practice and actually asked, like, hey, where's your office? I'd like to come and see you. And I'm like, I'm a student. Like, I actually work here. And he was shocked. And that speaks to how Coach Litt treated me.
Yeah.
And the way that he introduced me to the players and all that stuff is they thought of me as just another assistant coach. So it was great experience learning on the fly.
Yeah, I think it's great. And I do. It also speaks to the idea that I don't always think the best players make the best coaches, right?
Yeah.
I think that
absolutely.
some things are very easy for some guys, and it's hard for them to be good. I mean, Larry Bird was a phenomenal player,
Right.
and he wasn't a great coach. I'll be honest, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
For sure.
it,
And I always saw what guys should be doing. I wanted to be able to help them be able to do it. And then sometimes my own, I think, physical limitations at times also help me, I think, in coaching to try to get the most out of, different players. Because I can see myself in them.
Yeah, no, you had to have learned a lot, and I think that was kudos to Coach Litt for doing
Oh,
that,
for
and for
sure.
you, and for the entire because it definitely put you down a path that, I mean,
Yeah.
you came. I mean, Normal Community is a good sized high school,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you got a coaching. You wouldn't have gotten your first coaching gig if you had played, right, rather
Right.
than coached, right?
Absolutely.
So, uh, man, that decision has clearly put you down a path that, I don't know. Are you happy where you are?
Yeah, for sure. For
Well, then
sure.
there
And
you
even
go, right?
to be able to, like, when I went to Westland and was asked by Coach Rose to go recruiting, it was such a different deal to be like, oh, I've actually done this. Like, it was just a weird, he's thinking he's got a high school coach and a girls coach at that's coming in, and it's like, no, I've got experience, even though it was when I was 21, 22. I've been in a high school gym. I've talked to parents. I've done those things because, again, Coach Littrell trusted me to do that. So it was again a really good experience that I didn't even know at the time how well it would serve me down the road.
Yeah, no, it's such a great experience for you, and glad it worked out, because I know you've had, like, talk to me. You've had a little bit of a success as that girls coach at Normal, correct?
Yeah, when I first got the job a long time ago, that first go around, I was their third coach in 3 years. They hadn't
Yeah.
had any success, and the good part about that was, as a young coach, I had nothing. I had nothing to lose.
Well, let's
So I
be
was
honest, right? It's a district that is hiring a kid right out of college, right? They don't
yes,
just give that, like, that's not a great situation, right?
correct,
They don't.
correct. There's a
Yeah,
reason I was getting it. Yeah.
absolutely. No offense, but that's the way that
Yeah.
works, right?
Oh, for
Yeah.
sure. And they even asked me questions in the interview. I still remember where they were asking me questions like, how would you respond? How would you handle a season where you didn't win a game? You know, the questions are like, I didn't really know much about the program heading into that interview, but I knew leaving the interview, like, this isn't
It's
going to
not.
be
No,
there's going to be a lot of wins. Um,
that's a dead giveaway question, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that first year, I still remember we started 0-7, I think, and then we won. We ended up 9-17. We went 9-10 there down the stretch, and we played some really young kids, and we got better. And still to this day, one of my favorite coaching experiences. This is going to sound really strange, but the beginning of year two, we lost to a team 53-10, just in a miserable experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next night, or the next game, 2 nights later, we upset a team. And you could just see our kids, the way they responded to what was a horrible experience, and then were able to bounce back from that. It was a true statement of how going through adversity together can really mold a team. And that team, it was really a turning point, not only for me, but I think for those kids. It's still something. My daughter plays volleyball at Illinois Wesleyan. We just had a trip out to Maine with her volleyball team. And one of my former players from that team lives in Maine. And I was texting with her, and we still interact about those moments. It's not even about that her senior year, we had turned the program around and they went 27-3. We still joke around about losing 53-10, because that moment was almost like this cement of, okay, are we really in this together? Are we really going to buy in, or this is the time we could divide? And it really cemented kind of that program. We got things going. We won a sectional during those first 8 years, and put together some incredible teams. And then now we've really been able to do that again these last 3 years that we've been back together. So it's always easy when you've got great kids, and we do have great kids. But it's also been really fun to see teams buy into each other.
Yeah, you mentioned there that adversity is kind of like it's the catalyst sometimes to the greatness, but it doesn't have to be. And I
Right.
think that's probably where coaching comes in the most.
Mm-hmm.
And so from like, do you remember, this has been, what is that? That's been 20 some years ago,
Yeah,
right? And
absolutely.
you remember, what's what's the secret sauce to get from a 53-10 to the next
Yeah.
night
I
upsetting
think
a
just
team?
like when you talk to kids about the next play, forgetting what just happened and focusing on the next play, I think as coaches, we have to live that too.
Mm.
And I will say that I'm not always great at that by all means, but you can get wrapped up in an official's call, or you can get wrapped up in what a certain kid just did. But my ability to flip the switch to the next play, and then also for me to show that kid that this isn't about basketball. Like I still care about you and I love you even when you turn the ball over. And so to move, kind of turn the page, so to speak, and go to the next trip down the floor. And then it's the same thing with that game. Like to be able to come in the locker room and to say, hey, this is done. What can we learn from this? And what did you notice of how the avalanche kind of started and how we responded or didn't
Mm-hmm.
respond? How can we learn this? And then in the next game to be able to say things like, hey, they might be good, but they're not playing. This, we've been through tougher situations than this before together now. And we have a saying we always say to our kids, where things don't happen to us, they happen for us.
Oh,
And
it's one of my
it's
favorite things to say, and it's
yes,
hard. People don't. I think people don't think that they're like, well, what do you think? Like, you can't just go through life thinking these bad things happen and just say, oh, this is happening for me. But I don't know what the other option is,
correct,
coach. Right?
correct.
Like,
Yeah.
like
I mean,
I
when you're
look at
when
it
you're
from the
getting beat or you're getting kicked while you're down, I mean, I can either roll over or I can say, okay, how am I going to use this? And
yes.
that's always what we're asking.
Less than 1% of high school athletes ever become professional athletes. But as parents, we invest in their athletic pursuits because we know it's worth it. Sports build vital life skills. Confidence, perseverance, and the joy they bring are invaluable lessons from sports. But what if your athlete is facing the other side? What if anxiety, apathy, and sorrow have replaced the joy? Well, I can help. My name is Matt Thomann, and I am a certified mental coach. And I understand the challenges young athletes face. I've seen mental coaching transform the mindset of many young athletes. It's not about turning them into pros, but nurturing their inner strength for sports and for life. At Mental Metal Coaching, we offer virtual sessions to help them tackle challenges, build confidence, and rediscover the joy of sports. Every young athlete deserves to thrive. Mental Metal Coaching, facing adversity with a smile. The Mental Metal Podcast is brought to you by our friends at Quick Cut. Quick Cut is the new alternative to Huddle. It's no secret why Quick Cut is the fastest growing platform in the country. Their video analysis platform has everything you need. Plus, you'll get triple the storage at about half the price. And now get even more when you use the promo code 50hours for 50 hours of free video storage. Make the switch. You'll be glad you did. Visit quickcut.com today.
Last year we had an incredible season last year, and we set the team set the wins record in Normal community history. We went 31-4, but one of those 4 losses, we went to St. Louis and played a team, Incarnate Word. They've been undefeated Missouri State champs multiple times,
Yeah.
and they drilled us. And I remember having talks with our team at halftime and after the game, like that same thing. This is good for us. This is exactly what we need. We need to learn from this, because every time in that game that we didn't box out, or every single time that we didn't catch and be strong with the ball, a bad thing happened. And
Yeah.
so it would be really easy to get frustrated. But I'm not going to say I never get frustrated, but there's a lot of times where it's like, okay, how can we help our kids learn that this is actually working to their advantage, and not something that is just a miserable experience.
Yeah, and I'm guessing you probably you scheduled that game on purpose, right?
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the year, again, to be able to say, hey, these guys are pretty tough, but they're not Incarnate Word. So when we are playing teams, it always lets our kids know, hey, we've seen some of the best. And so, yes, this might be an intimidating opponent, but we shouldn't be intimidated because we've played better on their home floor.
Yeah. And I think that speaks right to the idea that it's not all about winning every game, or even if like sometimes you got to take some losses on purpose to get everything seems it's counterintuitive sometimes. And it's so hard. It's so hard to buy into that.
Yes. And especially because just like you said about that quote, that it doesn't happen to us, happens for us. Like it's so easy to just kind of say these things and have it be lip service, or to have the kids think, well, yeah, but we're in the midst of a really good season. So of course you feel that way when we're winning anyway. But we really try to live that every day, that, hey, we want you playing aggressively. And if that comes with mistakes, then that's great. We are constantly telling our team, a quote I got from John Wooden, that the team that makes the most mistakes actually is often the winning team, because they're the team making things happen and being aggressive. And so I think one thing I've learned is that as a young coach, I would sometimes get all bogged down in the mistakes. Mm-hmm. And then I would only get my players to make more mistakes.
Yeah.
The more I focused on the mistakes.
It definitely builds. And yes. I think the idea of, and this applies to life too, because you can't just like your schedule in life, you don't get to pick it. And some days things are going great for a long time. And some days you wake up and you're playing Incarnate Word and you didn't know it. Right.
Absolutely.
And what are you going to do about that? Like you don't set the schedule. It just happens, man. Yeah. And I think that if you're prepared, if you've done that on purpose, you're more prepared for life a little bit.
For sure.
So you mentioned a little bit, but one of the things I wanted to, we're already talking a little bit about mental toughness, and that's usually what we talk about on this podcast, but most of the conversations tend to go towards, okay, well, what's up with kids? What's going on with kids? We got to do this with kids. We got to do this. And then you started mentioning about, I'll watch coaches and talk about these kids. They get so worked up about this or whatever. And then I watch them for half of a quarter yell about one call at an official. And it's like, that's not a good example of mental toughness there. Mm-hmm. Because, and I'm not, and nobody's perfect. We know that, but I think I think it's worth mentioning and talking about that. This mental toughness is something coaches need to work on and exemplify.
Yeah,
and
for
that's
sure.
hard to do.
For sure. I think it's a great point. I also think it's a day-to-day challenge. We'll be having a great practice, and then, one kid will do something, and I'll become, I don't want to say obsessed, but frustrated by what just happened. And then all of a sudden I have the ability to derail the whole practice just by getting upset or by losing my focus on what we were supposed to be doing. And so the great thing there is, I think, to also have a staff of people that are also ready to tell you, like, hey, you got to move on. And you got to, whether that's the official or whether that's, and to kind of be on the same page. Because I think a lot of times, I think you're exactly right. I think a lot of times as coaches, we want to, I don't want to say blame, but we feel a lot of pressure, and we want there to be, well, so-and-so, this was Susie, this was Johnny. They weren't tough enough tonight, or they didn't do this. When in actuality, sometimes the other team is better, and we have to tip our cap, and that takes mental toughness to be able to shake that other coach's hand and sincerely congratulate them. One thing that I've been fortunate enough to do, I told you those first few years were really rough. And I remember everybody loved to see me walk into a gym when they were the other team, because it was pretty close to an automatic win when normal community was showing up. And those coaches were so nice. And then when we got better, it was funny how all of a sudden, our relationship seemed to change sometimes with other coaches.
Maybe they don't share the film quite as easy.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, whatever you need, Coach Feeney, no problem. And then, I know that. Yeah, that
and
changes.
And even how they treat you after the game. And I've tried, and again, I don't succeed with these things all the time, but I've tried to be like, hey, great game. Like, you guys beat us. You deserved it. You guys played great. because that's not an insult to our kids that the other team, outplayed us on that night. And again, how are we going to respond? How are we going to use this to be our best? Last year when we lost to O'Fallon in the sectional final, they went on to win the state championship. And I remember, when their coach was super excited they won. And man, we tipped our caps to them and we were like, you guys were really tough and you played great. And we were heartbroken. We didn't want that to end. As a coach, as a dad, my daughter was our senior point guard.
Oh, yeah.
It was heartbreaking. But on the other hand, I thought, I would not want to be that coach and to be treated like, oh, you guys were lucky, or, oh, if it wasn't for the refs, or if it wasn't. No, they beat us. They deserved it. And I don't want our kids to ever be that way either. Like, it doesn't do any good to blame others. How are we going to respond even when things don't go our way? And again, I'm not always great at that. But that's always our goal.
Yeah, and I think it's hard to ask your kids to act in a certain way towards you as the coach whenever you don't give that same sort of respect and do credit to an official or to another team, right?
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it's hypocritical to ask that.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I can think of times in my coaching career that I'm ashamed of where I've lost it on one of my players or when I've lost it on, and you do. And then you think like, man, how can I hold them accountable, to acting a certain way when maybe I didn't model that behavior, and that wasn't tough. And so then to go to them and again, I think a part of mental toughness is apologizing, to owning your mistakes. And I think a team ultimately they respect that. If you will say, hey, I screwed up. And that's also a great way to bond with your team, I think, to admit, hey, I don't think I put us in the best spot last night. I've been thinking about this and I could have helped you guys more. And that's something I learned from Coach Rose at Illinois Wesleyan. He would do that all the time. And even sometimes as an assistant coach, I'd be up to him after. I was like, what are you talking about? I thought you were great and I thought they were terrible. And he would just say, he's like, just because you say you're sorry doesn't mean you're wrong. Sometimes you say it, and then other times you're saying it because you want to take pressure off of them and realize also I'm in this foxhole with you. We're in this together. I'm not blaming you. We're in this together truly. Like, how do we make this better? Because we get to do this. Like I've been coaching a long time. These kids get to do this for 4 years. And so this is, it should be their team. It should be their experience.
And it's funny you say that because when you're talking about the pressure that coaches feel, and it's, early on in this conversation, we're talking about, hey, it's not all about the wins. It's not all about the wins. You got to do this. And then, but on some level it is, right? Because
absolutely
coaches have gotten fired for not having enough wins. So that's a hard thing to mix. Like, hey, how do you say, it's not all just basketball. It's more than basketball. It's more than wins.
Yeah.
But, oh, by the way, I have to win enough to actually keep my job here. And I don't have a great answer for that sometimes.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of what you said before, where it seems to be, seems kind of self-contradictory to even say that. But the truth is that kids perform better when they're not worried about the scoreboard. And so I don't, when I say that, it makes it sound like when we're saying it's not about winning, that we're trying to like manipulate them or like, I'm trying to convince you that I don't care about winning when I really do. They know that we want to win and they know that we're competitive and we're going to compete. But we also constantly tell them that like when we practice or when we go to a game, we want this to be the best 2 hours of your day. We want this to be with people that you are excited, that you feel encouraged by, that you feel like you're growing as a person. And it doesn't mean that every 2-hour session is going to be that way. But over the course of a season, we want this to be something where you felt like, hey, you were around people that legitimately cared about you, had your best interest in mind, and wanted you to get better. And when you do those things, then I really do think that your team's potential starts to take care of itself. And then when you're absolutely going to face adversity along the way, and then I think that's the biggest test, and that's where that mental toughness comes in. How do I respond to that and think, how am I going to use this for our team instead of panicking and making it seem like the wheels are falling off the bus and we have to change a bunch of things? And, how do we say, hey, we're okay and we believe in you even when times are tough?
Yeah. And I think it's once you start to build that culture and that idea, I think that mental toughness ideas, we like to watch like the best player.
Yeah.
Right. And talk about the mental, but it's something that has to be like all the way down the bench.
Mm-hmm.
Or it doesn't have to be, of course, but it's sure useful,
Yeah,
right? And there's a
absolutely.
lot. There's a lot of kids that don't play,
Yeah.
and you're still wanting them to be ready to go and mentally tough for the situation. How do you foster that, and what's the usefulness there?
Yeah. You think sometimes of your best players, a lot of times are the ones getting all the playing time, the credit. And so while we might say like, oh, they've got such a great attitude and hopefully they do. But sometimes the reason they do is because they're literally getting pretty much everything they want. I mean, they're having the dream experience. And so sometimes even those kids that maybe their attitude isn't the best, you realize, well, yeah, but they're in a really tough spot to have a good attitude. So one thing that again we have tried to do is we try to celebrate that a lot. Celebrate everybody being, a piece of it. One thing our team talks about a lot is after we got this from Point Guard College. Is something that they did is that they after drills they'll have the team celebrate each other, and it means a lot when your senior, maybe best player, points out what some other kid did in a drill that maybe that kid never gets to play very much, but they're pointing out, hey, I really appreciate how hard you went. I appreciate that you defended really hard. They did a great job. And sometimes it's something physical, sometimes it's just them talking. We ask the team for feedback a lot on what we can do better as coaches. And one of the things we got, because this is, again, something we implemented was the team complimenting each other. And one of the pieces of information we got is, hey, when we do that and celebrate each other, we want the coaches to be a part of it. And I thought they meant like they want us to compliment, but they also meant they wanted to compliment us. And it was really a way to give us more feedback on the fly. Hey, we appreciate, Coach, that you were positive even when we turned the ball over. And they also want to hear those positives from us. And we need to be doing that more. And so I think the more that you can celebrate those kids that maybe aren't doing that, while also not taking for granted your kids that are maybe doing, leading scorers or rebounders, that balance of getting them all to realize, hey, we're all a piece of this puzzle, and without any one piece, the picture is incomplete. And so how do we form the best picture, and how do we celebrate each other? And that's mental toughness in life. It's not easy to see somebody else have success. Heck, I'm a teacher, and when another teacher, gets recognized for being a great teacher, I'll admit there's a little bit of like, man, I think I do a pretty good job. Like this. Well,
Yeah, I'm over. Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's part of being on the team is hopefully we celebrate each other. We don't have that disease of me. And that is all about mental toughness to really focus on that and to realize that when one of us scores, we all score. When we have success, that's a team success. And then hopefully, like you mentioned, the best player, hopefully that kid's not, pouting because they didn't maybe score a lot, but we still had team success.
Yeah. There's so much there that I love the idea. The fact that you do this thing where you do these little gratitudes and you do these positive things. And one, that's phenomenal. I'm going to say something about that in a minute, but that you got that from kind of a survey of asking your kids about it. Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what I'm starting to find about a lot of coaches that are really successful and really put their kids through some adversity, which you have to have, right? You have to do it. You have to put them in tough spots.
Yep.
But they're very personal. I don't think you can be a good, I think if you need to be a good coach, you need to be a good person first. And that's, sometimes that gets lost. The gratitude thing, man, where they talk about what they do, like, hey, I appreciate that you did this and that. I think the gratitude piece gets missed, and we think that, you just want to have kids be thankful for things because it seems like this kindergarten thing, like we're supposed to do.
Absolutely.
And I know I used to kind of feel like that, and you didn't, but the more I got into this coaching stuff and learning about the importance of gratitude and how gratitude does more for the giver than it does the receiver. And I think that I know that changed my life quite a bit because now I know that if I give gratitude to somebody and really mean it, they're going to enjoy it, but it actually does more for me than it does them. And that, I don't know if you're aware of that whole idea, but you've got to be fostering so much positivity and just team unity whenever you're doing a little exercise like that. So,
well, and it's funny is you mentioned, that years ago, and I would have been the same way, you know,
Yeah.
and like, I don't know, it seems like a waste of practice time.
It does. Yes.
And
Right.
and the first few times we did it, it was awkward because the
Yeah.
kids
Oh
really
yeah.
didn't know, like, is this really something coach wants us to do? And some of them are just talking to talk. And then once they got sincere about
Yeah.
it was, and I would literally say this. I mean, it was life changing in some ways. Of
Yeah.
like, that is more meaningful than anything we're going to talk about today. Is what that kid just said.
Yeah, there's an exercise I do with teams that I work with that you have to like stand in front of somebody, give them a gratitude, give them something like an acknowledgement, and the receiver can't do anything but say thank you. Right. And
Yeah,
it gets rid of that awkwardness, and
yeah,
people love to just say, oh, it's nothing. Oh, and if you can start to give and receive compliments among your team, like when you
yeah,
say, oh, it's life changing, it's absolutely life
yeah,
changing. And you know, coaches are always like, oh, I got to work on this. I got to work on this. I got to work on this. Good news. Here's the news. You're not going to get to all of it, right?
right.
You're just
Yep.
not going to be all prepared. But little things like that are worth your practice time.
For sure.
Like the mindfulness, the gratitude, it's worth you got 2 hours. It's worth 10 minutes. It really is.
And you know this, like, yes, years later, kids are going to remember, you know, and they're going to look back and hopefully they had a great experience and hopefully you won. But the truth is that when they get together, they're going to talk about a lot of other things besides
Yeah.
that winning. And while again, we compete and we want to be the best we can be, the truth is that those things, you know, we've had some kids, unfortunately, in our time that have really battled with some mental health, you know,
Mm-hmm.
issues. And when I say that, I mean like they struggle sometimes with,
Yeah.
you know, making it to the next day. And you know, all of a sudden it's pretty. I want to say easy, but it's challenging at that point. But also it's easy to look past a drill when you're thinking like, I want to make sure that kid leaves here today feeling, you know, praised and
Yeah.
feeling like there's a bunch of people in this gym that care about her. And that again, that's more important than basketball. But on the other hand, obviously we're still about the team and we're competing and we're trying to play basketball, but we also want to make just like that, you know, collective team idea. We care about you where you are. Not just if you are helping us get that rebound. And that's a part of mental toughness for coaches because
Mm-hmm.
selfishly, I'm sure there's times where I absolutely I skip over the celebrations or the gratitudes because, well, we're behind schedule and I got to get to this next drill.
Yeah.
But I've never regretted it when we do it. You know, so it's
No.
something that it's the gift of time that you have to give your kids.
And here's another one of those counterintuitive things. Those things that you feel like are a waste of time and practice actually lead to more of the wins than the other things.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it speaks to the idea that we don't know as much as we think we
Right.
do. Right,
Absolutely.
that's a whole ego thing,
Yeah.
right? That,
For sure.
I know what this team needs right now, and it's
Yeah.
probably not physical,
Right.
right?
And the greatest coach in the world should go in and do a bunch of basketball drills. And if that team isn't connected and there's not that glue kind of sticking them together, you and I both know that's not, you can have a collection of the best talent, but that doesn't mean you're going to win. And you can have that team that for some reason is just sticky. They're glued together. They care about each other. They trust each other. And that team is going to be, and I don't care how many games you actually win, that team is going to be fun to coach and it's going to be a great experience. And that's going to be a team that everybody kind of remembers being a part of. And you'll probably end up overachieving because they
Yeah.
just care and they don't want it to end. You know, they want that journey to last as long as possible.
Yeah, confidence is knowing what you can do and then going out and doing it. But confidence is also knowing what you can't do. Well, I am confident that I can help your athlete if they're struggling with some mental aspects of their game. However, I'm also confident that I can't help them if you never schedule the first session. That's pretty simple. And I get it. You're busy. Your kid's hesitant. You aren't sure how coaching works. Well, let me fix some of that. If you click on the link provided, you'll be able to schedule a free 30-minute session with me. Your athlete will experience mental performance coaching, and you as the parent will get to ask some questions. There's no cost. There's no obligation. It's just an opportunity for you and your athlete to better understand the transformative power of mental performance coaching. I've helped dozens of athletes conquer anxiety, reach goals, and get over confidence issues. And I use proven methods and techniques. If your athlete has a goal, I'm confident I can help them get there. However, I can't schedule that first session for you. So click on the link to schedule that session. At Mental Metal Coaching, booking the first session is up to you, but the transformation is up to us. Man, so much good stuff there. I hope that people can, or coaches can, pick up on this, because it does feel like, I don't know, there's so much stuff we're talking about, like gratitude and mindfulness and things like that. When in your career did you start implementing some of that stuff? Because I guarantee you didn't do it at the beginning.
You are correct. And you didn't get that stuff from Coach Litt.
No, well, and you know what? But things change and people change.
For sure.
Yeah, right. Because I think he would. I mean, if he was coaching again now, he would probably do things a whole lot different.
Absolutely.
Right? And I say that all the time. I get this picture of, I know you're a better coach than I am, but I had I got this picture of me just in a regional game, and it's just like my veins are about to pop, and people are like, what is going on? And I'm like, well, you're just intense. And one of the players I'm yelling at is my daughter right there.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I'm sure you've been there, but
Absolutely.
There's a lot of things that you're like, oh, I wish I could. It's okay. I'm not sure I would dial down the intensity because I'm an intense person.
Right.
But I've got to find a way to, I would find a way to temper. You've got to have some of that, more of that love, compassion, gratitude, all those things to go with it.
Yeah.
And that's,
I think honestly, what really helped me was that when that first tenure ended at Normal, and then being at Wesleyan and being able to take as a volunteer, really just being kind of like in the background that first year, and then coaching men. I'm right. I mean, these are 18 to 22-year-old men. And I definitely, I mean, I can relate to the veins popping out and screaming, and that is me. I mean, if my players were watching this podcast, they do not want to just hear about positive Coach Feeney, because they'd be like, no, he gets on us and he yells. But I think part of that, and I tell our staff this all the time, like the more that we have relationships, who are you yelling at in that picture? You're yelling at your daughter. It's you have a great relationship with your daughter, and that's what we want our team to be. We can communicate urgently with each other because we have those relationships. And part of that mental toughness of the next play is we understand that, hey, I might be yelling right now, but I love you, I care about you, and this isn't changing that. The fact that you just didn't block out and I am all over you for it, that doesn't change that after this we're going to celebrate the things that you did well and recognize those, while also working on cleaning up, the things that you didn't. But in the intensity of the moment, I'm going to get all over you about that. So by no means am I saying that I am, touchy-feely and soft, but I will say I think I've matured. My former players probably, one of them came back and watched a game that we played, and she goes, man, it seems like you're just different.
Yeah.
And she goes, I wouldn't say you've mellowed, but you don't react to every little thing. And I think, I think I've matured. I think in the beginning I did react to every little thing. And I thought it like that was coaching, like you had to coach every aspect. But I think there's a lot of stuff you realize what I don't comment on is maybe even more important, sometimes than what I do.
That's something that was struggle for me. I know that, and because that's a little bit of an ego thing. It's like if I don't say it, and that was as much with my own genetic kids as anything. It's like sometimes the more knowledge you have about something, the more responsibility you're like, if I don't say this, it's not going to happen. But it's like the receiver can only take so much, right?
Yeah.
Information,
Absolutely.
instruction, all
Correct.
those things. So I think you're right that a coach a good coach matures and understands what needs to be said and what needs not to be said.
Yeah.
And that's
some of my favorite moments in coaching are, it'd be an intense moment and I'll call a kid over and they're maybe coming over thinking I'm going to give them, some really important piece of advice. And I just say like, hey, how's it going out here? What's up? What are you doing after the game? And sometimes in the early going would have thought like, oh, don't do that. You're going to distract them. But sometimes that's actually what they need. Like, let's take the focus off of this high intensity situation and let's just remember, hey, we're okay. Right. And I'm in this with you and we're all good. And they see you smile and then maybe they just relax a little bit. Sometimes I do that differently and just say, hey, take a deep breath. We're all good. And again, it's just a different way that, again, in the early going, I wouldn't have done. And I look back, and in some ways, I'm like, oh man, I did a disservice to some of those kids that I coached. And in moments, I still do. I mean, for sure. But you learn from these things, and again, that's part of that mental toughness. Is I want to be better tomorrow than I was today. So you're constantly trying to think about how could I respond better to that situation.
Yeah, and you mentioned talking about getting the kids to relax, and you were talking a little bit about getting them to play risk-free.
Yeah.
And to play without that anxiety, because kids that play with anxiety, it's a struggle, right? And it's hard, but how do you do that on purpose? Because I think but you have to give away some control to be able to do that as a coach. How do you foster that idea?
This is one positive I feel like that came out of COVID. Is that year we were so, the Illinois basketball season got all screwed up, and we ended up playing in the spring, and we played a shortened schedule. A team that we played actually had 4 kids after the game get diagnosed with COVID, so then we got shut down for 2 weeks. We were so thankful for every opportunity we got to be in there, and we knew we weren't going to have a postseason. We knew that those things had already been canceled, so we really tried to focus on how do we make this a worthwhile experience. And then after that, our staff was kind of like, hey, there's a lot of this stuff we should be doing all the time. Like, why are we approaching this so differently? Because it actually seemed like our kids had, a really good experience, and it was a shortened season, but it didn't feel less significant. And so I think that's one positive that came out. And then I think you're just intentional about it. You let your staff know that, hey, this is important to us, and I want your feedback on it. I want you to hold me accountable. I'm going to hold you accountable to it. And I think that hopefully your kids then start to feed in, and then you trust your kids. You realize, you mentioned giving up control. We tell our team constantly, like, this is your experience. This is your team. I want to hear your feedback. When you think that there's something we can be doing better, it doesn't mean I'll always agree with you and be ready for an answer if you come up with a suggestion, but I sincerely want your feedback. We start every halftime. We give the kids a few minutes. We go in and then we say, hey, what have you guys been talking about? And when we give them ownership, again, in the beginning, it was awkward. They didn't know how to talk about basketball. The conversations that our kids have now about basketball after they've been in our program for 3 or 4 years are really impressive. And quite honestly, those are a lot of halftime talks where they get done talking and I just say, yes, agreed, let's go do it. And I didn't have to do anything, and it gives up my voice because they're going to get sick of that voice anyway. It's their ownership, and they realize, it's their ship anyway. So ultimately I'm trying to help them, and I'm trying to help them guide their ship. I think in my early coaching days, I thought of it as my ship. And that was a huge mistake, and it was an ego thing. And the more I think of it as their experience, the better coach I am.
I think that, I know that's if you can go into a halftime and your kids are having the discussion without you and it's on point.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's what you should do. But you mentioned in there that it was awkward at first. And I think that a lot of things that we've talked about today, about the gratitude, the mindfulness, the giving up control things, they don't happen overnight. Right. So I think that people try them, coaches try them a little bit, and you're like, that didn't work.
Correct.
Right. You might actually some things might get worse before they get better. But I think if you're doing things in the right way, and it's the right way, and it's best for the kids, it'll work out.
Yeah. We went down. So on that trip to Incarnate Word, we took our team to watch a couple college practices in St. Louis that weekend. And both teams that we watched did some sort of mindfulness activity before practice. And St. Louis University actually, like, their kids laid down. They played a recording that seemed to be like a meditative kind of thing that they were listening to about positive thinking. And one of their kids fell asleep. And nobody got mad at the kid. Nobody did anything. No. And they all got up and got ready. And then they stretched. And then they did practice. And I was talking to their coach, and she said, hey, that's our time. We do it every day. And in the beginning, if you do it, it's going to be super weird. And your kids are going to think it's weird because they're just not used to it. And we haven't done that, but that's something we've talked about doing as a program. But again, I witnessed that, and it's exactly to your point of, yep, this was strange in the beginning. I mentioned that we stole that, celebration thing from Point Guard College. I had a former player
Mm-hmm.
that's now a coach, Stephen Rudnicki, who played at Wesleyan. He's the one that kind of gave me that activity, and I remember him saying the exact same thing. Like, it was weird because now
Yep.
it's funny because how many coaches I talk to and I share that, and they say, "Well, you're a girls coach," and I say, "Well, I got it from a boys coach,
Yeah.
and it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be weird for a week, and then it's going to get better."
Yep.
And so many of the things we do, they think, well, your positive thinking thing, oh, that's great for girls. It's great for people. It's
Yes,
great
I agree.
for us.
If I were to say, hey, if we were to put the words together, basketball and meditation, and you really like put in a Google search, you'd probably come up with Phil Jackson, right?
Yeah.
That's
Right.
probably what you're coming up
Yeah.
with. And wow, how many rings does he have, right?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
and like that's like the top level of basketball, and they're doing this, and that's what I found is I've started to working with. I've interviewed college coaches, and I've even interviewed Henry Domercant, and all of these guys. I noticed the higher it goes up, the more they focus on this stuff.
Yeah.
But then we get into the high school and the junior high levels, and they're like, well, that's good for somebody else, but this doesn't really work. And it's the kids that probably need it more than the adults.
I think you're right.
And I think that I don't want to get on a soapbox here, but that's part of it because I didn't do a good job of it and I've had to go through some stuff to get to the point where I am now. But I'm just saying that this stuff, it's not just touchy feely.
Yeah.
It is. Some of it's touchy feely, but it's also very, very useful.
Yeah.
And
when we talk about, like, how often do basketball coaches talk about fundamentals, or, you do healing drills and like, oh, those are our daily vitamins. These are our daily vitamins. But what we're talking about, these are daily vitamins in life. These are things that are going to help serve them, not just on a basketball court, but in life. And if we really put an emphasis on that, we're not just helping them for their athletic careers, we're helping them hopefully in their livelihoods.
Meditation, breath work, stuff like that, it helps reduce stress, reduce depression, it helps injuries, it helps lowers the blood pressure, it's mental focus. I'm like, all those things are what you would want a player to do in the moment, right?
Right. Absolutely.
But I think that again we go back to that same idea, the whole meditation and breath work stuff. It doesn't happen by one time. You don't like get excited and be like, I'm going to do some meditation. I'm going to be fine. No, it has to be a daily practice. And that's where we lose people. It's like, it takes too much time.
Absolutely.
It takes too much time. I'd rather just be upset and anxious all day.
Yeah.
I'll just not meditate. Right.
I have a former player who makes fun of me because we were in a key moment in the game and I was telling her to relax and I screamed, relax. And was like tense and everything. And I'm yelling her to relax. And it actually, I didn't mean it to be funny, but she almost laughed because she was like, do you realize, the visual that you're giving me as you tell me to relax? The past few years, we had a player, there was a very good player for us, but had some anxiety and sometimes would have panic attacks that she couldn't really control. And it might be at practice, it might be at school. And to your point, I had to learn a lot about this stuff because when she first came to me, it was during a school day. And the amount of help I could give her was like, breathe deep, relax.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's not really helpful. And then when we kind of focused in on, hey, how can I focus in on, I want you to picture, this and picture moving this with your eyes and something else. And then she would calm down. And again, at first I was like, oh, good, I'm helping her. And then I thought, wait a second, this would be good for all of us. And when I look back on times where I've been tense and I haven't been able to calm down, this would have been really good for me to focus on something else and to be able to find my center, so to speak, so that I can be the best that I can be.
Hey, I'm one of these, you hear the words panic attacks and things like that, and PTSD. You're like, come on, just suck it up, whatever.
Yeah.
But then I'll be honest, as somebody now who, after all the things that I've been through, is somebody who's gone to the ER with a panic attack. You're like, wait a minute, this is like real, like. I'd like to say I'm a fairly tough guy, and I ended up.
Well, I know you are. Yeah.
And I'm like, wait a minute. This stuff is like, if you let yourself downward spiral, right? and let your brain get there. Like
Yep.
the time to deal with a panic attack is not during the panic attack. It's the preparation.
Right. Yeah.
And yes, to help.
And as coaches, we are perpetuating panic.
Yes.
And
that's
a player will turn the ball over, and I'm already thinking about the last game when we turned the ball over 25 times, and I'm thinking, here we go again, and that's just it's a dangerous mindset to get into,
yes.
and it's contagious because negativity can spread a lot faster than anything positive.
Oh yeah, and we put those negative phrases like "don't turn the ball over," right? Well, that's that's the last thing you say is the first thing you do, right? And that's
absolutely.
But it becomes such a practice, like, and it's hard. Nobody's perfect at it. It's really hard at it. It's really hard to do. But yeah, woo, Coach. Tell you what. Last question. Let's do that because we're going to run out of time here. What did I not ask that I should have?
Well,
what did we miss?
I wouldn't say really anything, but I do want to give a shout out to one thing. So one thing that we've discovered here lately is this concept. I read a book. There's a guy named John Troutwine. I don't know if you ever heard of John Troutwine, but he played 1 year with the Boston Red Sox. He was a pitcher, and unfortunately, his family had a tragedy. His son unexpectedly seemed like a really happy kid, and unexpectedly took his own life.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a good friend of mine give me this book. And as a parent, I thought it was unbelievable. It's called My Living Will because his son's name was Will. But he's got a phrase in there that he talks about being a life teammate. And so much of what we talk about is, as coaches, we talk about being a great teammate. And being a life teammate means that, when unfortunately the Troutwine family was going through this terrible tragedy, he realized that the people that reached out to him were his former baseball teammates, both from professional, college, high school, all these different levels. You and I started this conversation by saying we were teammates at one point. And then there's life that you go through, and you realize, life gets hard, and you have challenges, and it's not obviously it's not always just an athletic teammate, but you have life teammates, and we want our kids to realize, like as coaches, we're your life teammates forever, if you want us to be. And then we want that's the relationship that we want to foster on our teams. And so, when I think about, you asked earlier a question of like, what changed you, and how do you think you've grown as a coach? I had a good friend of mine give me that book, and it changed almost like a mindset of, I would love our kids to leave our program and to think, we've got some life teammates here that are going to be, if my life gets hard and I go through a tough time, whether that be illness or divorce, or I've got people that I know will care about me and will be there with me. And I think if we hopefully can perpetuate that and spread that word, that's something, again, that can be life-changing, and that you're making a bigger difference than just basketball.
Athletics, teams, the whole concept has so much potential to do so much.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate that we have let it do the wrong things.
Yes.
And that gets me going thinking about that. It's just, there's so much, and I think that's why I do what I do, is because there's so much potential with athletics. And I hate that it's this source of anxiety for kids, and we don't want that. We want the opposite, And,
well, when I first started coaching, I loved to go to coaching clinics, and you get drills and plays, and the more I'm in coaching, the more I love things like your podcast and things that remind me of the why. The why, there's going to be a few kids that are going to go on and play a sport at the next level, and even those kids need these things, but most of our kids aren't. I mean, most of our kids, we want, what's the value of athletics? And the more that we can be pouring into kids and showing them that true value, and again, I fail at it all the time, but the more that can be our why, the more energizing I find it, the less I get burned out about the time I put into this, and the more meaningful those relationships are. And ultimately, the more I can look my kids in the eye and be like, hey, we did this, and it was fun, and it was rewarding, and it was hard at times, but we knew that we cared about each other, and it wasn't a transactional thing where I was just trying to use you to beat a rival or something.
And you keep talking about failing at it, but I'd sure I'd much rather fail at trying to do the right thing than not even
Yes.
trying to do the right thing. Right.
Absolutely.
And so it's,
Absolutely.
yeah. And that's so, and I feel like that's where, I know that's where you are. It's, man, just a great conversation. I'm gonna have a lot to think about now. The whole thing gets me going and thinking about it, but yeah. Any last words, Coach?
No, I don't think so. Just, I tell you what, I appreciate what you're doing and that you
I
are
appreciate it.
spreading this, and I love the podcast, man. So keep it going.
Awesome. Good luck this year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's coming quick. We
Yeah.
get started next week. We're super excited, and hopefully we can live up to some of these things I've talked about. I better walk the walk now.
No, I know, and that's good. So all these conversations are really good, right? Because
Absolutely.
I get better at this stuff because I'm constantly talking about it, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
it does. It's yeah. It's like reading those daily Bible verses, right? It's
Yeah,
like you get tell
absolutely.
somebody else, and then, yeah, it's just you got to walk the walk. So
Yes.
Coach, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and we'll catch up soon.
All right, sounds good. Thanks a lot.
Less than 1% of high school athletes ever become professional athletes. But as parents, we invest in their athletic pursuits because we know it's worth it. Sports build vital life skills. Confidence, perseverance, and the joy they bring are invaluable lessons from sports. But what if your athlete is facing the other side? What if anxiety, apathy, and sorrow have replaced the joy? Well, I can help. My name is Matt Thomann, and I am a certified mental coach. And I understand the challenges young athletes face. I've seen mental coaching transform the mindset of many young athletes. It's not about turning them into pros, but nurturing their inner strength for sports and for life. At Mental Metal Coaching, we offer virtual sessions to help them tackle challenges, build confidence, and rediscover the joy of sports. Every young athlete deserves to thrive. Mental Metal Coaching, facing adversity with a smile.
I have enjoyed every guest I've had on the Mental Metal podcast. I learned so much from each of them. But I do think this might been one of my favorite conversations I've had. It was so enlightening for me. And as I mentioned, I felt validated and I feel very convicted now about what I'm doing and knowing that I'm on the right path and what I'm trying to get out for coaches, for athletes, and what's doing best for them, and how to coaches and athletes can put time into mental health and get an ROI that's worth it, right? You're going to get return on the investment if you do this. And I will start by saying, here are some of the excuses. First of all, a lot of coaches immediately say, I just don't have time. I've got A, B, and C that I need to get done, and I have to get all the way through X, Y, Z, and we only have 2 weeks before our first game, or it's only two practices between each game or something, and I just don't have time. There's so much to do. I don't have time to add extra stuff, or maybe they can just do that on their own. That's a common excuse. And it's not a good excuse. It's just not. It is a lot of coaches focus on fundamentals and say, hey, these are our fundamentals that we need to work on. The the mental side of things and focusing on things like gratitude stuff, meditation, some breath work, some things like this, all these things that I talk about, they should be one of your fundamentals. They should be one of the things you're doing with your athletes every day, period. It should be part of your practice plan. Another excuse is, and Feeney got this all the time, and I've coached boys and girls, but he gets it all the time. And he said, people say, oh, well, that gratitude stuff and having that conversation with the girls, it's easier because they're girls. And that's extremely sexist. Let's be honest, to just assume that girls are going to have more feelings and be more open about it than the boys, right? If that's your excuse, that is just an excuse. It's you're looking for a reason not to do it. Trust me, when you do stuff, it does not matter the sex or the age. If you start these things, these activities, it's going to be awkward. period. The first time you do something like in this, it's going to be awkward. But how is that any different than when you add a new drill, right? You have a new drill that you want to work on with your athletes, and you're like, hey, we need to get better at, I don't know, we need to get better at movement. So we're going to do this, some passing drill, and we need to be able to cut, move, and pass. And I found this drill on the internet we need to do. And I think this will help us. I guarantee you the first time it's going to be awful. It's going to be awful. It's going to be awkward. It's no different than this mental stuff that we want to work with. You pick up some stuff that you want to do, and you pick it and you use it, and it's going to be awkward at first. It's okay. Acknowledge it. I do this all the time when I work with individuals and athletes and teams. It's one of the first things I say. This first session, I own it. I say, this is going to be awkward. It's going to be awkward because you've never done it before, right? That's okay. Own that and say it's going to be awkward, and it won't matter the sex, right? It's going to be awkward regardless for the boys, for the girls, and don't let that be an excuse. It's just not. And I think those are some of the worry that it's going to be awkward, the worry that it's not going to go well. That's another excuse is you say, well, we tried it a little bit, doesn't go well. We didn't see the benefit. Like if you start with little kids and start working ball handling drills or laying down bunts or things like this, it takes a long time to get progress. It's like you wouldn't just stop doing ball handling drills with 8-year-olds after a week because they didn't get it, right? You say, no, this is something we really need. So we're going to keep working on it, and we're going to see progress. It's just going to be slow. But I think we often give up with mental exercises because we don't see immediate progress. It's the same thing, right? The difference is I think a lot of times in our society or coaches or whoever, we just don't believe in it. Like if we have a drill that we know somebody needs, and it's an athletic drill or a physical drill or weightlifting or whatever, we're like, we know this is important. So we're going to stick with it, even if it takes a while. I don't think we give the same latitude to mental exercises. And I think that's something that needs to be changed. And I think that as the coaches of sports, of athletes, high school, college, junior high, I think that needs to be on us a little bit. I think it needs to be on us to change that perception. When we're talking about, like, let's say we're talking meditation and breath work. Trust me, asking a team to meditate and do breath work is like the first time you do it, I guarantee it's going to be all those things. It's going to be awkward. It's not going to go well. You're not going to see immediate success from it. You're not going to see all the growth from it. But the long-term effects of meditation, breath work, intentionality, like all these things, it's well documented and very clear. Like just a handful of things that they suggest can be helpful from meditation and breath work. More deep sleep. That's probably good for your athletes. More balanced blood pressure. Most of our athletes younger than not that big a deal, but like for us, it'd be good for us, us that have some blood pressure issues, but even kids get worked up. Reduces the effect of trauma. I could go into all day talking about like the ACEs are that childhood trauma and some of the issues with that. A lot of kids have it. And if you're able to do the meditation and breath work, you're going to ease that trauma and heal it a little bit. It actually, breath work and meditation can help with injuries, helping heal injuries faster, better. It reduces addictive behaviors. It lessens stress and anxiety. Those are good things for athletes. Better mental focus. That's kind of like if you less your stress and anxiety, you can have better mental focus. It helps more with a mind-body connection, right? The more you do the breath work, the meditation, things like that, these things are going to help an athlete better understand their own body, even to the point that can actually increase athletic endurance and athletic abilities. These things are going to help. And then Feeney was also talking about gratitude. The research is extremely clear on gratitude. The more you practice gratitude, it changes your own positive mindset and actually helps your fulfillment and helps you build other virtues. Cicero, I've probably said it before on this podcast. He's a Roman philosopher that said gratitude is not only the best of all virtues, it's the parent of all virtues. If you want your kids, your athletes to be better at something, know that gratitude is one of the first steps to get there. It's when he's doing this circle where the players are talking about they notice that people are doing something well, they're thankful for somebody, or they're noticing positives in someone. That does as much for the giver as it does receiver, if not more. It helps our brains to develop positive neural pathways, which help us in all sorts of situations. Now, if I'm naming all this stuff and I'm talking about gratitude exercises and meditation and breath work, and you're like, okay, but I don't understand what that is, and I don't even know how I would do that. Well, there's this little thing called the internet, and you can go on and find stuff, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but find exercises that are to be good for athletes and start trying it. Right? It's the same, treat the same way you would for finding new drills for a skill you want to leave. And hey, I'll be honest, if you want to hire a coach or somebody that's trained in this stuff to bring in, I think it is money that is well spent to have somebody like me, like a mental performance coach, come in and work with your team, teach you some drills. And maybe you have me, somebody like me come in and I deal with the awkwardness the first time. It is such a valuable tool for you, your athletes, and quite honestly, it will help the team aspect to the point, and your athletes and you to the point that, yes, if you're worried about wins, it helps. All right. All that list of things that I just mentioned about the, more mental focus and lessening the effects of trauma and more mind-body connection. Imagine you've got a team of athletes and they're all better at those things. How does it not help? I think that's my call to action here. That's how I'm calling you out, is if you aren't doing something purposefully, intentionally to help your athletes get better at the mental aspect, to increase their mental health, you are doing them a disservice, and you are not making them the best they can, and you're not making them the best team they can. Find something, put the time into creating it, add it as part of your practice plans, use it. Okay. You can disagree with me if you want. That's fine. A lot of people do, but I'm telling you, I've been now a couple years going into this, working with athletes, coaches, stuff like this. And the higher up levels in the successful coaches and the higher, the D1 professional stuff like that, and the coaches that do really well in high school and junior high, they're doing this stuff. They see the importance, and they wouldn't do it without it now. That's my call to action to you. If you want to be a better coach, put it in your practice plan. Start focusing on some mental health for the betterment of your athletes, your record, your team, all those things. So there you go. I'm calling you out, and let me know what you think. By all means, hit me up, ask me questions. I'm here. So it's been a great episode. I appreciate it. I will catch you next time. I've been Coach Matt Thomann, and this is the Mental Metal Podcast.
Thanks again for listening to the Mental Metal Podcast, produced by Coraggio Media. Sponsored by QuickCut, a video management platform for every level of play. And by Mental Metal Coaching, helping athletes learn to face adversity in a spirited and resilient way. The Mental Metal Podcast is created each week to help players develop more mental toughness, and that is something that will help all of us. So help me out and like and share the Mental Metal Podcast with your friends. Until next time, keep forging your metal.